For years, DreamWorks has hidden away a movie so unbelievably cursed that they had to rework it so others wouldn't suffer its wrath. Additionally adding these elements, like the song Smash Mouth, Eddie Murphy,
what animation and people, that sound like bullshit to me.
And a cross-dressing wolf. This original version hasn't been seen not since the late 90s until now.
Hello there! Well, who else were you expecting? Hello, me darlings! Harry here, and if you're into missing to lost media, then please consider to subscribe to the channel, as I make many more videos just like this one. And the more subscribers I have, I can convince my parents that YouTube's a viable career. Hopefully. But anyway, let's get into our video subject, which is the missing Chris Farley version of Shrek. But before we dive into things, a little bit of context is needed. So let's go back to where it all started with the book.
Shrek was a 1990s children's book written by children's author and cartoon illustrator William Steig. The plot follows the title character, an ogre, who is booted off by his parents. But there's no matter. Fortunately for Shrek, being a foul creature, he's more than capable of fending for himself, as one of his repellents is, well, his smell. Nobody can stand it. Belching flames, swallowing lightning bolts, Shrek is virtually invincible, and he loves bringing on chaos. Through the fortune teller of a witch and the guidance of a donkey, the story concludes with Shrek finding his ideal match, a disgusting princess. Both of them are wed and live horribly ever after. The book was very much a subversion of the classic fairy tale tropes. In any other story, Shrek would have the ingredients to be the ideal bad guy to take down. Instead, the story is a retelling of a modern fairy tale, belonging within its own category, playfully having fun with the classic tropes. A year after the book's publication, Steig would find some financial success by selling on the film rights to the producers John H. Williams and Steven Spielberg. At Paramount Pictures for a number of years, Katzenberg had migrated to Disney during the mid-80s to supervise and manage the films, with a keen interest within the animation department.
I loved Walt's heritage. I learned the animation business from him, even though, as you said, I never actually met him through his work and his archives. And he said, I make movies for children and the child that exists in all of us.
At the time, they were being heavily downgraded, and even considerations to completely dissolve the branch off. Thankfully, through steady successes and reformatting the division, the Walt Disney Corporation's original bread and butter rised up to popularity to embellish in a new renaissance. Not just financially rewarding, but also climbing the ranks of winning trophy awards.
The Oscar goes to Alan Menken and Howard Ashman for Beauty and the Beast.
And earning a further appreciation from people that were beyond 6 or 9.
I've seen Beauty and the Beast twice with my children. I'm going to be back for more very soon. It's a winner.
I've always thought animation was such an incredible form and an art form, but I think for a long time, people didn't give it the credentials that it deserved.
Head of the company Michael Eisner certainly appreciated the trophies, but saw it as no endgame. Katzenberg had an endgame in mind, not to necessarily have one of his films win Best Picture, but admirations to be hired second to Eisner. Both of them had a great 18 years working relationship, although when things weren't going well, Disney president Frank Wells could aid as the middleman for the working relationship. But unfortunately, in Easter of 1994, he died in a helicopter accident, a huge loss to the corporation. The relationship between Eisner and Katzenberg crumbled during that year, to a point where Katzenberg essentially had no future with Disney.
One day after the company announced the resignation of Disney Studios chief Jeffrey Katzenberg.
Katzenberg said he doesn't know where he's going yet.
My greatest regret professionally, not that I got fired, it's how I got fired. There must have been a better way for me to go about separating. Just hurt by it, and it was hard. 8 days later, after getting fired, I started DreamWorks with David Geffen and Steven Spielberg, so I got over it in about 7.5 days.
Founded by Jeffrey Katzenberg, Steven Spielberg, and David Geffen, with Jeffrey personally in charge with the animation department. From there, they worked on a lineup of projects that Katzenberg would have struggled to greenlight at Disney, such as a biblical retelling of the Ten Commandments, a personal project that Katzenberg had longed to do for years. But the Shrek movie was right there from the beginning, as if there was any way to stand out from the competition, with the cinematic animation landscape largely dominated by fairy tale stories, then it would have to be the antiquated movie to make fun of those tales. One of the original conceptions was to make Shrek into a traditionally animated film, with possibly Bill Murray as Shrek and Steve Martin as Donkey, but penultimately Bill Murray, along with Nicolas Cage and Leonardo DiCaprio, gave a pardon on the project. But it was Saturday Night Live comedian Chris Farley who landed the role. Shrek was an overly joyful, charismatic character, perfectly emulating the comedian's persona, which Farley gave it his all. Sweating and exhausted at the end of each recording session, the crew did find him quite exhausting to work with, but hey, he was a funny chap.
Enough said.
Production officially started in October of 1996, but the animation lineup started a month early, as they were instead going to use CGI technology, integrating the animated characters with live-action model sets. An ambitious task, so they first prepped up with a test sequence. Shrek is a teenage ogre who's reluctant to follow the family business of scaring people, but instead he longs to befriend and help individuals, and have aspirations to become a knight. To prove his worth, he goes on a mission for ruler Lord Farquaad to rescue Princess Fiona for Lord Farquaad to marry. Along the journey, he's accompanied with a donkey named, Donkey, who's now played by Eddie Murphy. Once they rescued Fiona, played by Genevieve Garotolo, she's extremely sour and bitter, a sheer contrast on Shrek's bubbly personality. But along their journey, somehow between the two of them, a romance may be blooming. By spring of '97, a finalised animatic was presented to Katzenberg, with 80 to 90% of Chris Farley's dialogue already recorded, with elements of the CGI test sprinkled in the animatic. By the end of the screening, Jeffrey wasn't impressed, later on being quoted to say, "It looked terrible, it didn't work, it wasn't funny, and we didn't like it." So the team would have to go back and rework the story, but the production troubles weren't over just yet.
Ladies and gentlemen, about an hour, I guess, before we taped tonight's program, we heard very sad and upsetting news. We found out that Chris Farley died.
In December of that same year, Chris Farley had passed away due to a consumption of a drug overdose, with Chris Farley unable to do any new additional voice recordings on what was already a non-flattering movie to begin with, meaning that now they would have to rework the whole story, as the film was essentially tailor-made for Farley. A new individual that was hired on to direct the picture was Vicky Jensen, who had just come off the production of Road to El Dorado. Watching the Chris Farley version of Shrek, unlike Katzenberg, she was much more enlightened of the working reel, but agreed that some tweaks could be done. The film was having tonal contrasts. It could be hilarious with humour on akin to Ren and Stimpy, but on the other hand, it would clash with the adventurous tone. Both of these aspects couldn't work simultaneously, so it was decided to drop the adventurous side in favour for a more comedic film. This stance, the team felt that Shrek was more humbling and relatable as a character. From the words of Aaron Warner, for when the last piece of the puzzle finally fit in, once we worked out the opening scene with Shrek in his outhouse, we had a clear idea on how to approach the comedy and what we were trying to say. We were all brought up listening and reading fairy tales, but not many on our team could really relate to them. With Shrek, it was the comedy that drove the whole thing. And we were lucky enough to have possibly the funniest group of storyboard artists ever assembled. Shortly after the first Austin Powers movie, they approached Mike Myers to see if he wanted to play the role of Shrek, which he was certainly interested, but he requested if they could rewrite the screenplay to remove any references to Chris Farley. So it was more of a Mike Myers film, rather than him taking over a Chris Farley production. By this point, the character of Shrek had completely transformed. He was instead a bit of a brute, more content of his own company. Additionally changing the character of Fiona, making her the opposite to Shrek. Lovable, kindful, and joyful. So they had to replace Janine's sarcastic performance, as she was now too similar to Shrek, replacing her with Cameras Diaz.
You may or may not know this, but a lot of people are fired from pilots or films early on, and you don't hear about it a lot. It's not unusual. I'm not saying poor me. Am I thrilled with that stuff? No, it hurts terribly. Even stuff you hated. Once you're fired from, you're like, oh!
After several years of Mike Myers recording the dialogue for Shrek, he was unhappy with the voice. So he insisted to the production team to redo his performance, but this time with a Scottish accent, to make Shrek seem more working class.
I got a crap on deck that could choke a donkey.
But at this point they'd already started animating, so additional costs went into reworking those scenes to fit in with the new dialogue, which upped the budget at $5 million more. Being an immensely complicated production, industry veterans were already writing off Shrek before its release. Thankfully for DreamWorks, the journey was worth it, as Shrek became the third highest grossing movie of the year, just behind the first Harry Potter and Fellowship of the Rings. It became the first movie to win Best Animated Film of the Year at the Oscars. Shrek had drastically steered the boat for DreamWorks' future, as the animation department became independent and formatted into its own company, discontinuing their trend of hand-drawn movies, as each one after the other was dwindling in box office returns, in favour for the rising popularity of CGI flicks, where Disney similarly followed behind. For the first time in the cinematic market of animated films, Disney had a rival, and had compensated their iconology just to stay within the game. While yes, this level of success for DreamWorks would only truly last until the mid-2010s, at least for that brief period, Katzenberg was truly on top of Disney. Very little of the Chris Farley version of Shrek has reappeared. According to the director Vicky Jensen, both versions were extremely tonally different, with the Mike Myers Shrek only sharing 2 sequences conceptually from the original, being on the conversations involving the onions and the campfire, the latter of which was uploaded on Vimeo Pro by DreamWorks developer John Garbett.
People see me and they go, "Ah, a big, stupid, stinky, smelly, ugly ogre! I'm so scared!" And they judge me before they even know me.
Currently, this upload is the only way to hear Chris Farley's original dialogue. Elements of the test animation of 1997, nicknamed Feel Good, its assets and fragments, has spontaneously reappeared online. A YouTuber by the username Uncle Porksums had collected a number of images of the storyboard within variation of quality to recreate the sequence. In 2014, one of the original animators had sold a scan model of Shrek that was used in the Feel Good test. The seller had provided some screenshots of the animation, but was unable to find his copy of the video footage at the time of the auction. A VHS copy is likely still out there in private hands. In 2021, Shrek was selected to be administered into the Library of Congress, a US government-funded project, where every year they select 25 movie titles for being culturally significant to be preserved for future generations. They can only accept a film as it was originally released. So while the original Star Wars was amongst the first movies to be selected, it's never been officially submitted, as Lucas only ever provided the 97 special edition print of Star Wars. So it's only the final cut that the library really desires, rather than an early version or a work in progress of the same movie. But with Shrek being made at the turn of the century, it's a pretty safe guess that DreamWorks securely archives their projects, even if they will never see the light of day. It's a difficult situation to see on how the Chris Farley version could be officially released. Typically, animation houses don't release a full animatic of an animated feature, especially those that were an early version and had a different cast. Maybe down the road, they could make a documentary about the franchise of Shrek, providing some snippets of clips of the Chris Farley incarnation, but I'm sure for most Shrek nerds it would be an absolute dream to have it be released as a bonus feature for a DVD or a streaming service. But then could it be argued that it would be disrespectful to release a half-finished version of Shrek with a long-deceased actor? Well, one can still be optimistic, I suppose. As remember, Shrek is love, Shrek is life. Oh, sorry. I just had to squeeze it in there, you know? I just had to just slip it in there at some point. I've always wanted to say that.
Wait! Don't forget to subscribe. If you do, I'll give you a headbutt. That's ogre for thank you.
Bye-bye. See you later.